Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my power ranking series. For my number 24 team, we're going to be looking at the Seattle Seahawks. So let's start with the quarterback situation since it's the most obvious one here. It's poor. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I really don't expect much from this crew. Geno Smith is looking like he'll be the starter here. I don't think he showed much as a starter in the offense last year when Wilson got hurt, and I don't think he'll change my opinion of him this season. He's really here because he knows the offense already. He's the veteran quarterback that's familiar with the team. They seem to like him. So I really think that you'll probably see him early before we get to see the other guy here, which is Drew Lock, who was acquired through that big trade. He's who they are more interested in here. He has the high upside, which is why the Broncos selected him a few years ago. And really what is the issue is that Lock really just never seemed to learn how to throw the ball with anticipation. I don't know whether that's because he lacks processor in the NFL level still, or he struggles to see the field, or maybe it's a combination of both. It's really something Seattle's going to have to figure out here. So Luck has the arm talent that you look for in a prospect. It's really more the mental side of the game that he seems to struggle with. So he'll get one here with Seattle to kind of show his growth and kind of prove if he can be something. So I imagine that even if Geno's playing okay, at least halfway through the season, they'll want to see what they have in Luck. O-line here, looking pretty decent actually. I was actually pretty impressed with this off season. The biggest worries were at the offensive tackle situation, and honestly, I think they might have completely solved that in one go. Cross was one of my top players. He is a phenomenal pass protector, and he has been just tested against the best in college, and he has held up extremely well. Not to mention, he is still 21 years old and has insane high upside, athletically speaking. So he is the mold of a franchise left tackle. And then Seattle then doubles down, going the third round and picking Abraham Lucas on the other side, who also has great athletics, tested very often in college. I mean, he comes also for a very pass-heavy offense that demands a lot of their tackles in college. You know, we're kind of in the era where most of these linemen can be quite protected in a lot of these schemes, which means they have to learn a lot coming in. And neither of these guys are, I don't think, are going to be struggling with that early on. They have really had to learn a lot more than most of the other teams ask of their linemen. His time in the Senior Bowl as well really raised his stock. He held his own again against some of these best rushers, and it kind of proved his worth. I think he's a great value for Seattle in the third. They keep the hometown guy. I think he projects to be actually a very solid starter for them, like immediately, and for really years to come. There's a couple guys behind them in Curhan and Forsyth. Curhan's proved himself actually pretty well. I think he's currently the starter, so there's a battle between Lucas and Curhan there. I probably imagine that Lucas does win out eventually. And they still have Stone Forsyth, who has incredible upside. Another very pass-heavy guy. Not as extreme an athlete as the other two, though. On the interior, we have an absolute mauler in Damian Lewis, who in his first two seasons, he just produced some of the highest run blocking grades in the league. He's still pretty flat-footed in pass protection, but that scheme change last year helped him a lot. It allows him to move forward at the defensive line instead of backwards, which is where he seems to have most of his stability problems. They still have Gabe Jackson here. He's been a pretty solid starter for a few years. I imagine he'll be that again for Seattle. I expect that quality average play out of him at right guard. They brought in Blythe here at center, who's pretty familiar with the offense that Seattle now runs. It's kind of coming off 1 year with the Chiefs. He really could see the field much. Humphrey took basically all the center snaps, and honestly, they had no need to ever really look Blythe's way. Humphrey tested out extremely well. I had him as a first round grade on my board, and he proved that like 10 times over with that rookie season with the Chiefs. So they had no need to look at that. I imagine Blythe will be a low level starter caliber play here. If they get more than that from him, since he's more familiar with Waldron and this offense, that's incredibly great. He's also a really good athlete. Okay, backfield receivers. This is where we got firepower. Metcalf and Lockett, extremely nice duo. They complement each other well. Metcalf takes that X wide receiver role. He's been steadily improving over seasons. Last year of his contract right now with Seattle. Pete Carroll and everyone has already made it very well known that they are going to be paying him. It's just kind of, talking about exacts now. He deserves it, in my opinion. Definitely in that AJ Brown category. So I expect the contract as well to be somewhere around that. They still got Tyler Lockett here. He can wind up in the Y or in the slot. He is great at stretching the field on those deep routes. He's been very stable as a wide receiver now for years. So I like that combination to continue to make this offense very QB friendly for this season and for futures. There are two deep guys there in Swain and Eskridge who I think have shown some quality play. They picked up some intriguing guys as well in Goodwin. They picked up Bo Melton the seventh, who was a little bit of a slip. I had him more as like a fifth to sixth. And they picked up a athletic freak, very much like DK and Derek Young. So they've got some intriguing guys for preseason, I think, to look at. Now, tight end. Getting Noah Fant here is huge. Seattle wanted him very bad when it was his time to be drafted, and they are extremely happy to have him here and take down that every down tight end duties. He's an exceptional athlete at tight end. He's shown great talent already in the league. Uh, Fant did try to put a little more weight on last season. He thought it might push his run blocking even higher, but it actually didn't really help him. Actually, kind of hurt his game. So he's back down to that kind of like 250 range, 245 range. He's focusing more on technique this season, which, from what I've seen, does seem to be helping him a lot more. He's back to that old ranking I have of him. They still have Will Dissly here. They signed him to a long-term deal. He's mostly here for that tight end two kind of quick pass scheme or for blocking. Blocking is especially what they love him here for. So he is one of the better blocking, quote unquote tight ends. So I think they'll be using him mostly in that role. He's also a good locker room guy. They like him a lot. So running back room is interesting. I know it's probably most of you kind of looked at the order I have it as is a little questionable, so we'll get to that. Penny was brought back here. He had a great end to the regular season where he finally got to play some significant time. His injury history has really made it hard to see him as a reliable back. He hasn't even played 50% of the games he's been contracted for, and that's already showing up again. He already has a hamstring issue in OTAs right now. So there's that. The injuries are already showing back up. Carson, I have some reservations on. From what I've seen, is they are waiting on one more thing. I think it's about 1 week from now. They'll be kind of getting some more info on him, but it's looking like he's going to maybe need to medically retire. The surgery didn't seem to go overly well, from what the doctors have said. He's been kind of stuck in rehab for a few months. So if you are a Seattle Seahawks fan and you are frustrated and wondering why they picked Kenneth Walker, this is why. Carson's probably going to be gone. Penny's already hurt and probably not going to get the same production again. So Kenneth Walker is an extremely explosive player. He's already played in a pro style offense. It's showing actually up at camp already. He is super familiar. He's already making plays for them. So again, if you're wondering why they picked Kenneth Walker that early, this is exactly why. It's because they could not trust the other two to be available, and it's already looking like they're not going to be. So they do have some depth, thankfully, as well, past those two, to sit behind Walker if Walker does take the lead back role, which I wouldn't be surprised if he does that early. Um, Homers will be here for special teams and third downs. They like him for that role. He's fine. I'm not overly high on him. Dallas, I do like a little more. He plays with some power, so he can kind of take the running downhill role that Chris Carson has if he does have to medically retire. So the depth here is a little bit better. Okay, starting with the front seven on defense, we have a very tough group. Shelby Harris is now here to kind of bring that interior pass rush with Quentin Jefferson, who's also back in Seattle where he kind of had his breakout. Both, I imagine, will be lining up that three tech, maybe 4-eye to kind of rush the passer. Something Seattle sorely needed last year was that interior pressure. Woods and Ford back here again. They made sure they kept them. Ford was given a long-term deal before last season. Woods was given it again this season. Uh, they really line up mostly at nose tackle. I imagine they'll be playing that role again. They played it well last year. They'll mostly be out for those rundowns. So that's quality play. For one side of the edge group, we've got a combination of rushers. Darrell Taylor was playing a very similar edge role last year. A lot of these 2-point stances. He had really good results doing it too, so I imagine he's the most likely starter of the bunch. He is incredibly explosive off snap. Robinson, Alton does most of his work out of that 3 or 4 point stance. He plays probably more for their 4-3 or nickel looks. Plays with a ton of power and length, something Seattle really likes to have in at least one of their rushers, and they develop it well. A really good pickup here was Smith in the 5th round. That's right around where I had him. I kind of had him as an early 5th on my board, so I think he offers very solid play with a decent floor coming from a big program. I think he'll get some work at some point this season. I actually really like that move by them. On the other side, we have Seattle's biggest free agent signing, literally, by the way. That is like the most they've ever spent on a free agent. It's kind of crazy to look at. It's only like 10 mil a year. Um, and Uchenna Wusu. Uchenna played very well for this exact scheme for the Chargers last year, and the deal they actually got him for was pretty decent. It's pretty both player and team friendly. So he's got a chance to continue his growth here, and I like his odds of doing so. I did have to do a separate mention here for Boya Mafe, who I personally wasn't overly high on in the draft as a pure rusher. As a pure rusher, I had him as a 3rd round grade. But literally the exact day of day 2 of the draft, Seattle came out and said exactly how they plan to use him. They have not hit it at all, which makes that selection make a lot more sense to me. They, how do I say this? When I was watching tape, I noticed one particular thing about Mafe. He has an almost uncanny ability to drop and play coverage, coming up for these lines of like lining up in the A gap or lining up at edge, and it is extremely good. It really utilizes his extreme athletics as well to cover ground, and he actually matches up in man as really well as again against these tight ends and running backs. So having him kind of drop into these man and zone looks really is what ups his value, and I can see why they valued him more at that 2nd round grade. They already said that after they draft him, they'll be looking to drop him in coverage in their 3-3-5 looks, and some in cover 4 as well in their 3-4 on nickel and dive. They think they're going to be using him to rush the passer more, and they'll be kind of mixing it up as well in between the two. So this is where I like his tool belt a lot better. He's going to be more focused on pass rush with his athletics and less having to pay these run defense or really technical looks for him early on. So I now understand that move a lot more. That's more of an okay move for Seattle to do. Now they understand they want to use him more as a cover guy as well. For linebacker, we got Brooks and Barton here for the starting roles. There's some depth players here that are not out of question either. Burke Irvin kind of comes to my mind mostly at this. They'll get some work on defense and special teams every now and then, but we'll stick to these two to talk about so this video isn't overly long. Barton hasn't gotten overly many opportunities, but in the few he has, he's been a solid run defender. Every now and again, he'll play his coverage decently well. Not too much else to say there. We'll see what he does, getting some more starting time here. Brooks is really the big piece, though. He is a great athlete with a really big size. He's kind of a rare linebacker size at this point. Like, I mean, I don't even know if Fred Warner is technically the same size as Brooks, at least weight-wise. So to get a guy who can move like that at that size is rare, especially since that guy covers sideline to sideline. He can match up on tight ends. He's improved that coverage a lot. He's improved a lot in that category. He carries those guys up the seams and on over routes particularly well. There's actually a great video breakdown of Bobby Wagner actually teaching and talking about Jordan Brooks, and you can see Jordan make a mistake early on in that game, and then Bobby goes and talks over him, and then the Rams gave him that look 2 more times, and the Rams had nowhere to go with it. So he is a very fast learner, and it showed in these 2 seasons here. So comparing to where most of these like NFL guys are sitting at 220, for him to do that at like 240, 245 is what he often sits at. I mean, I expect continued growth here for Brooks and for him to establish himself even more in that defense, which utilizes his skill set even better in their new scheme change. And he'll be calling the plays here on defense as well. Secondary, pretty good mix of talent here. Some of it is immediate talent, some of it is up and coming. Let's start with the safeties. Diggs got his extension. He deserved it. He played that single high free safety very well. Double high, he also projects to play very well, which they'll be running a little bit here. I really doubt his play dips off much, if at all, going into this new scheme. Who actually fits this scheme really well is Jamal Adams. When Jamal Adams was back at that, like Jamal Adams is probably a top 5 strong safety. I don't think there's any contest on that. He probably sits at like 4 or 3 at strong safety for me. But when he was back at like this is the number one strong safety kind of look, this was the scheme he did it in. You look at that New York Jets defense, this is like cover four, these cover six looks, like this is where he excelled. I don't think Seattle is going to be blitzing him nearly as much as they had before because they don't need him to get the pressure for them anymore. They have a better group to get pressure now, and they can let him do more of his insane looks back in coverage back when he was back on the Jets, which I'm very happy to see for them. That should help elevate their defense even more. At corner, they brought back Sidney Jones. He started a little slow last year, but he picked up his play down the stretch. Bringing him back on a 1 year deal that isn't for a whole hell of a lot really kind of gives him a chance to improve and get a better deal in the offseason. Benefits both sides pretty well. The other side, we have Trey Brown, who was a cornerback I really liked last year as a prospect. He had really solid tape, and if you watched his Senior Bowl tape, that is actually the best Senior Bowl tape I've seen from a corner in recent memory. Like we're talking like routes that are designed for the cornerback to lose if the receiver is actually, decent. Like things like comebacks and stuff like that and one-on-one man coverage down scheme or the corner doesn't know what route it is. Like that is designed for the corner to lose, and he was not only beating them, he was picking off the quarterbacks, which is insane. So he got unfortunately sidelined by an injury last year after showing that good a play as well. He has had extremely good coverage grades when he was playing. So I'm excited to see how he does in this group after that rookie campaign, and he projects pretty well for this scheme as well. They brought in a couple young guys. Kobe Bryant, he's another kind of tested corner in college, played very well alongside Gardner. He fits the scheme pretty well. Seattle was very heavy on drafting for scheme this year. Not only did they do that, they got value, but where they drafted them. So since people didn't want to throw Gardner's way for Bryant, they often threw Bryant's way. He punished them for it heavily too. So Seattle kind of got him right where I had him ranked, and he projects to fit that defense well. They also grabbed Tariq Woolen. He's a guy Carroll is really excited about. He's got extreme athletics at corner and extreme length. Most of his issues come with agility and more of that technical stuff. It showed up at the Senior Bowl. He knows how to use his physical size and length really well, and he can match extremely well as well. But where he loses is on like technical breakdowns, like comebacks or little zig routes, is where he loses. If you watch him versus Calvin Austin, you can see it. At slot corner, we got some old faces here, and Justin Coleman. Coleman really had his massive breakout here with Seattle, so it makes a ton of sense for them to bring him back, try to get that quality play back. I think he's just been kind of stuck. Got paid big with the Lions. He had a cool little short stint with the Dolphins. He did play okay, but I think this is where he'll be utilized better, if I can say that. Special teams, they rank very highly here, and I expect Seattle to have yet again another good season on special teams. For their actual specialists themselves, Myers has been kind of on and off again as a kicker. He makes the long, difficult kicks, but he struggles to do the low 30 to 40-yard kicks. Like those are like layups that for an NFL kicker should be making, especially one that is actually paid well. So he'll be looking to kind of prove that he deserves another contract after having a kind of up and down season. The star here is Michael Dixon. He's proved yet again that he is one, if not the best punter in football. He is an essential piece here for Seattle to maintain field position. Very similar to the Panthers with Hecker, who's also up there. The coordinators here, they're all right. They were mostly in-house hires, with Waldron kind of being the recent exception here, being taken from the Rams last season to run that kind of West Coast Shanahan offense. I expect Izzo will help elevate his special teams and help the others do their jobs. Clint Hurt here, familiar with this new defensive scheme, was hired from in-house. A lot of the players love him, so we'll see. The jury's kind of out on him. We do have Pete Carroll here. We got to talk about. He's kind of getting up there in age. People have wondered how long does he have left. He still does front office work for this team as well. So I would not be surprised if next season he does pull a Bruce Arians and switches to a front office role after finding an heir to his job. I don't think that's out of the question, especially with the moves they've made, which we'll talk about in a second. He has adjusted his way of thinking a lot, and so far on defense, he has shown his ability to adjust. He has switched his mentality on corner, like where he had a hard like 6'2" cutoff almost. He's drafting guys like Trey Brown at 5'10" who play extremely well, and he's drafting more for talent at this point. Especially now, he's also switching to a cover four scheme instead of a cover three that he was notorious for designing and making useful. So I think I expect good quality on both sides. Honestly, I think the biggest question is how will that show up on offense? So what I did want to talk about here about that successor was you have to note that they picked up Sean Desai from the Bears, who is very highly touted around the league. A lot of teams wanted him, and they signed him here for the assistant head coach role. So while he might not be on your screen, he is going to be a big integral piece here for Seattle, and he may be actually what Carroll's heir is for this coaching job, whenever that is. He is a very big grab for them, and I think it does fit the narrative of, like I said, Carroll finding his heir for the coaching role here. So, Seahawks, they are looking for a quick turnaround of a rebuild here after a very solid draft. I think they can be poised to pull it off. The culture here is very strong, and the base level of play has honestly been great for them over the last decade. Do not be surprised for them to beat higher rated opponents with more talent every now and then. I think they'll surprise some teams. The quarterback play is really the only thing that's holding them back. I think once that's figured out, almost similar to the Lions, I expect them to be right into that good category where we can start thinking, okay, are they just good or are they playoff worthy? So we'll see where that's going to happen through the free agency or draft next season. They got their draft capital to do either. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all next time. Later.